Why Jeremy Corbyn didn't want to be in this meeting because you were there. What's your understanding of that situation?
Well, it's fairly juvenile behaviour from a leader of the opposition when actually I think what your viewers expect us to do at a time of national political crisis is to come together. Credit to the Prime Minister for bringing together the representatives of all the opposition groups in the House of Commons to try and find a way forward yesterday. It's unfathomable why Jeremy Corbyn should walk out simply because I was there representing 11 MPs. In fact, Anna Soubry, who's one of the independent group of MPs, was also with me. And it was very clear. I mean, the Prime Minister told me herself that the reason that he decided not to attend was because we were there. But anyway, look, this isn't about Jeremy Corbyn. We've got a big national political crisis that we've got to deal with, and let's focus on that, I'd suggest.
Well, yes, let's put just one point, because we put those points to Barry Gardiner, and he said the reason is because nobody knows where the money for your group is coming from. So he was sort of implying that there was an element of confusion there. And also, you were elected an MP, and therefore they're talking to the Prime Minister at all as a Labour Party member.
Well, look, when you're in a hole, stop digging. That would be my advice to Barry Gardiner and the Labour Party. A mistake was made here. Just hold your hands up and say the wrong judgment was made and move on. You know, in terms of the funding of the independent group, the overwhelming majority of our funding has come from small donors. And in fact, when we launched the press conference where the former Labour members left, we actually paid for that press conference ourselves because we didn't have all this money that people talk about. And we have said that although we operate through a company limited by guarantee at the moment because we're not a political party, our hope is to become one soon, we are applying the same transparency standards that apply to political parties to our group. I mean, we've only been going for 3 weeks. But this is what you do. You muck rate and you throw around this type of stuff when you're in a desperate situation. I would just say, look, give up, Barry, actually focus on the real issues. I think the other excuse that was offered was that, you know, we had been invited to a meeting with the de facto Deputy Prime Minister, David Lidington, and we'd been ushered into the wrong room by mistake. I mean, that's a lie. That is simply not true. As I said, the Prime Minister herself said it was very clear she was going to invite representatives of all the different opposition groups. The independent group was included in that. He objected, he walked out. But look, the real issue is the House of Commons has actually got to come to a decision. You know, we've got to work out where a majority lies in the House of Commons on a way forward on this Brexit mess.
So in that meeting that you had, Chuka, did you come to any conclusions when you all got into the room? Admittedly, Jeremy Corbyn didn't want to be part of it. Were there any conclusions? Did you feel like, because the Labour Party feeling is that it was a waste of time and actually Theresa May wasn't willing to listen to what you had to say, do you feel like there was any traction at all in that meeting that you had with the Prime Minister?
Well, look, there was a frank exchange of views, and obviously all of us are going to have to compromise if we want to find a way forward. Now, the independent group is clear that we would be prepared not to stand in the way of the Prime Minister's deal next week if she's prepared to put it to a confirmatory people's vote of the British people with Remain on the ballot. Now, that may not necessarily end up with the result that we want, and we don't like her deal, but we would be prepared not to stand in the way of it if she's prepared to refer this back to the people. And at the very least, Ben, we think that we need a series of indicative votes in the House of Commons where you lay out all of the options and then you have a process perhaps whereby the option that commands the least support is knocked out at each vote, and you end up with a set of options that potentially can carry a majority. And we accept that may not mean that we get that all-important people's vote that the independent group of MPs have been campaigning for. I think what was alarming to me was that it's quite clear that if we're on the cliff edge next Friday and we don't have a deal, the European Council refuses to grant an extension because the House of Commons won't approve the withdrawal agreement, there really is only one way to stop us from crashing out with a disastrous no-deal Brexit, and that is to revoke Article 50. And the Prime Minister is absolutely adamant she will not do that. And I think she has a sacred duty, to use her words, to prevent us leaving the European Union without a deal, because the impact immediately and in the medium to long term will be absolutely catastrophic for our country. And I think history will never forgive her if she continues to follow that course.
MPs that she is concerned about, you voted Remain, you want to stay in the EU, you said you'd support her on condition we had a second referendum, hoping that people would then vote Remain. You're not actually backing the referendum result at all. So you're, in your own world, debating something that the public has already decided it wants out.
If only it were that simple, Kate. I mean, if it was that simple, we wouldn't be having all these intractable problems over the last few months and the, you know, extreme mess that people watch unfold on Good Morning Britain every single week around Brexit. If only it were that simple. The problem is whilst we were asked, do you want to remain or leave the European Union in 2016, we weren't actually asked how. The problem is the two things are inextricably linked, but very, very important. Now, I voted to invoke Article 50 because I felt that the House of Commons had a duty to try and square the circle on all the massive, really undeliverable promises that were made by people like Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, and we had a duty to try to do that. But it has proved absolutely impossible to deliver on all of those, on the main promises in many respects. And that has been the problem here.
Yeah.
And this is the issue. You know, you've got a mandate from three years ago now, which actually didn't take account of what is possible, what can we actually get. I mean, when we were having these debates, and I came on your show a lot to talk about it, we were having a hypothetical discussion as to what would happen if we voted to leave. Now we actually know, but then we don't know, given the circumstances, what is the will of the people now? And by the way, Kate, I mean, don't forget that over 2 million young people who are now eligible to vote, who are going to be affected by this more than any other group, and they haven't had a say on it yet. And we know that, you know, all the polls indicate they don't want this, and yet they're going to end up with this thing being imposed on them, and they'll have to live with it longer than any other group, longer than us.
Chuka, unfortunately, we're out of time.
We're not flouncing out. We're not like Jeremy Corbyn. We're just saying we're out of time.
We're out of time. As ever, it's good to get your perspective.
I always like coming on your show. I won't walk out. Don't worry. I'm
good
here.
stuff. That's what we like to hear. It's always good to have you. Thank you for joining us this morning, Chuka.